For hundreds of years, British farmers have gone to sleep at night not expecting anything strange or unusual to happen, but then wake up the next day to find mysterious shapes carved into their crops, shapes only visible from the sky. With no entrance or exit marks from the fields and no sophisticated machinery lying around that could account for their creation, explanations have ranged from alien visitors sending us messages to hoaxers trying to get people stirred up. We've never dived into crop circles before here on Metaphysical, so it's about time to go over some of the most famous, most bizarre, and most recent ones that have appeared. Yes, that's right, crop circles are still appearing out of nowhere in 2025. Are any of them real, or is this an elaborate hoax? Join me, investigative researcher Rob Counts, and remote viewer John Vivanco for a metaphysical show that's out of this world. And John, how you doing?
Good. This is a good one. I like this subject.
It's an age-old mystery.
It is.
Spanning,
it's
as we
like
said,
an evergreen mystery. It just keeps going and going.
It does. And I do feel like for haters out there that in the age of technology in 2025, something like this could conceivably be possible by hoaxers, but that doesn't account for the earliest recording of crop circles that go back hundreds of years. I think we've got some in the 1600s even.
They used to think it was the devil mowing fields. Like there was one farmer who saw lights and what he said was fire in his field. The next day he woke up and there were circles. And he said the devil was out mowing his field. And so there was a woodcut that was made about that and put in the papers.
Yeah. And when you're, in the 1600s or whatever it is, that would be the conclusion you came
Right.
to. I mean, what else could account for that? I mean, there were some accounts I read where in more swampy marshlands, there were some farmers that would see a craft rising up from the swamp, shoot away, and then they would go to observe later on, and all of the reeds in that area were laid down flat as well.
Well, those were called flying saucer nests, mainly an Australian phenomena. The original thing that, do you remember the guys Doug and Dave from the 1970s and 1980s who were the crop circle hoaxers in Great Britain? And they were thrown all over the news, papered everywhere as the guys who were doing all the crop circles. And they're just all, well, the reason we got started in this is because we saw that some farmers found flying or UFO nests, like flying saucer nests. So we decided that we wanted to recreate those things in farmers' fields.
And a lot of the, craze around crop circles does come from the UK. But I just want to note for everyone out there that it's not just the UK that has these. I mean, it's the UK, Holland, Germany, Italy, France, and then outside of Europe, you have Canada, the US, and even Australia. So as far over as Australia, where crop circles have been reported for a number of years. Some of the data, depending on where you look, it seems like there is a massive tourist attraction to certain areas in the UK where this happens. Millions have been reported coming to the UK to observe crop circles. I imagine that would be bringing in a lot of revenue. So there may be a reason for people to hoax this in those towns if it's bringing in a ton of revenue and it's what the economy thrives on in that area. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the full story, though. That's going to happen wherever you have that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, but the thing is that it's not hard to tell the difference between a hoaxed one and a so-called real one, because there's a science behind it. For those that know, you can confirm whether it's a truly anomalous configuration design versus somebody's just hoaxing. Every single crop circle is reported on like what's going on in the field. Because, okay, so the way that that the stalk grows is that it's got a bulb. It's got a little bulbous thing at the bottom of it. It's called a pulvini. That's normally how it grows. So in anomalous crop circles, that node has expanded and it's blown. And that causes it to lay in a certain direction. All right. So that plant is still alive. It's still growing. The only way that the pulvini can be blown is by a high amount of energy. Samples of the soil have been taken, and with X-ray diffraction, one of the things that they've found out is that the crystallinity of the soil can only become that way unless there was an 1800 degree heat. So the crystallinity, measuring the crystallinity of the soil, will show you the configuration of atoms within the soil, and the configuration of these circles that have blown nodes. The crystallinity can only be achieved that way if it has reached 1800 degrees. This is something that is still being studied. In fact, the seeds from crop circles will grow about 5 times faster than normal seeds. The crop will still grow as well, whereas hoaxed crops, it'll kill it. This is what pisses farmers off, right? Hoaxing will kill parts of the crop, but the real crop circles won't do that. There are other measurements that people have taken. Electromagnetic usually stays very high after a crop circle in those areas too, with cameras and stuff malfunctioning. But the science behind it is pretty darn solid, because they show these characteristics, and these characteristics cannot be recreated by hoaxers, unless you're talking about maybe like a black ops group using microwaves or something. So basically, it expands that pulvini, and you're talking about 1800 degrees, which seems like it would kill it, but it doesn't kill the plant. In fact, it energizes the plant. The only thing that you have to ask is, did they do on the ground research? Do those have blown nodes? If they don't have blown nodes, then you walk away from it.
Another part of the mystery is the sacred geometry that seems to be used in the crop circle artwork, for lack of a better term to describe it. The ones that seem to be hoaxed, and one of these just is super annoying, like during 2020 COVID, there was an exact crop circle of, the spike proteins in COVID. That just seems totally ridiculous. There's obviously nothing going on there. And then some of them have been more artistic, even with faces of aliens and things like that, which seem like total nonsense to me. But then the ones that have this sacred geometry where you can dig into the math around it, that's communicating a much deeper cosmic language, I would assume, than anything that we've seen, because some of those mathematical layouts are incredible.
Also, the ones that are symbolic, maybe like sort of Celtic or Welsh symbols, are also interesting to me. Just south of San Francisco, and in that area, there's just lots of fields, tons of farm fields, and a crop circle showed up there. I can't remember exactly what it was. We had remote viewed it, and it was literally a marketing campaign. Like, we'd remote viewed it, and it's like, wait, this is talking about marketing, and this is talking about business and stuff like that, and trying to ID who it was or what it was, and it seemed like it was a computer company. I think it was like a chip or something that they had done in the field. And then later on, NVIDIA came out and said, yeah, we made the crop circle because we're releasing this new like chip design or something like that. I didn't go out to the field to look at it because the data was like, it's just a marketing stunt. You would just find bent over stalks. That's it. You wouldn't find blown nodes and them laying down that way. So, I just say, like, at the very least, like, if anyone's doing any crop circle research, go there first, try to find the on ground stuff. But, a lot of times the farmers aren't going to let people onto their fields now. They'll trample things, and people aren't going to get that on the ground data. There's just a picture of it flying over with a drone or something.
I mean, these are private properties of these farmers who are trying to make a living off of these crops. It's pretty inconvenient that people would be on the property trying to research these things. And some of them more famous crop circles or the more amazing ones, the farmers have gone out the next day and screwed the entire thing up, which indicates to me that they're upset about
Right.
this. I mean, they can't be happy that this is happening in their
Yeah,
fields
they just
around
mow
here.
them. Yeah, I think I've seen video of farmers mowing crop circles before. Just get rid of it.
Yeah, and the most interesting place I would say is the village of Avebury, which is in Wiltshire, I think it's pronounced. It does have some of these ancient sites, large circles that are much larger than Stonehenge. Those circles seem to be, and I say seem to be because these aren't exact science. It's not an exact science when you start talking about ley lines, but they seem to be on ley lines where two of these lines are crossing. And a lot of theories have come out of that have nothing to do or less to do with alien technology and more to do with electromagnetics and or some type of cyclone that can occur due to the electromagnetics that create these things. But how would the math be so perfect and so organized if it's just simply a electromagnetic cyclone? It wouldn't. It might be round, but there wouldn't be the intricacies that we find in some of these crop circles. What do you think about that?
Like during World War II, pilots flew over areas in England. I think that general area, and have taken and took aerial photographs of crop circles. The circles were a lot simpler. They were much simpler. And as time goes forward, it looks like they become more and more complicated. So I think those old ones you might be able to attribute to something like that. But I don't think you can attribute these to something like that, because I think they would exist more as just these cyclones. But the thing is that can that actually cause 1800 degrees and blow all the nodes into a certain pattern? You know what I'm saying? I have no idea. Like, as far as remote viewing data goes, it doesn't support that theory.
We would have had to have created energy weapons that could achieve really exact mathematical schemes.
Which it may be. Maybe now that's a thing. I know people have spoken about black helicopters and stuff like that flying around these sites.
But wouldn't those black helicopters be to study the circles as well because they're an
Yeah,
anomaly?
trying to reverse engineer them for one thing, but it only takes so long for them to reverse engineer things.
What is it about this one town, Wiltshire, too, is the question. It's sort of the Disney world of of crop
Right,
circles, you know,
right,
specifically Avebury. It's bizarre that they seem to all accumulate in this one area, a higher frequency of them. And then you have in Britain, you have these really old ancient sites like Stonehenge or the circle that's in Avebury that's much larger that seems to be on ley lines. We know that Stonehenge is also on a ley line. We haven't done a show specifically on ley lines yet. I do believe that there is something strange to ley lines after doing more peripheral research on these things. One of the theories that I found very interesting about the Montauk project specifically is that there seems to be some ley lines running through Montauk. And Preston, who is a very technically advanced electro engineer, most of his book, The Montauk Project, Experiments in Time, most of that book, honestly, is him technically explaining how a lot of the stuff that they did at Montauk was possible through technology. You know, it's hard to talk about that in if you're explaining the story of what happened there, because those aren't necessarily the most interesting points. But what makes it so hard to refute is the fact that not only is he talking about some of the craziest stuff that ever happened in history, but then also the on the ground technical aspects of that project. And what at the end of his book, he talks about these lines that are going through one of the intersections in Montauk. It was a combination both of human made energy and the fact that there was a natural vortex in this area that was allowing for the massive amounts of energy during the 70s and the 80s to create the situation with the technology that they had in Montauk and all of the bizarre
right.
activities. Yeah, just curious, what are your thoughts on ley lines in general, and then maybe you know, uh, their influence on the crop circles?
There's telluric energy that does run under the earth. I mean, you can measure that stuff, and there was a professor. I think he wrote the book Seeds of Plenty. I don't know if you can get that book anymore, but he did experiments in measuring telluric energy, and especially when it related to ancient structures and how they would utilize telluric energy ley lines in order to do certain things, like charge seeds, for instance, which would cause seeds to grow faster and more, just produce more. That type of study, that type of research is such a niche little area. But there are people with scientific brains that do study that. It's just hard to find that kind of information. But now, when you get to certain areas in California, for instance, there are these rock walls that just are like all over the place in certain areas. Some of the rock walls will spiral up hills and will be in very strange, illogical configurations. The Spanish had even referenced them as being there, when they came upon that area a very, very long time ago. But modern geologists believe that they are maybe like old ranchers' walls, because the explanation of somebody creating those walls beyond ranchers makes no sense to their worldview. But when we had remote viewed, the original intention for creation of those walls, it was to move in a sense, to create artificial ley lines or create lines of telluric energy and telluric current in certain
Hmm.
directions in order to utilize it for certain things, because the rocks had a granite piezoelectric component to them. And somehow that transfers energy into certain locations where they can do things like charge seeds or charge water, or stuff like that. So yeah, there are, in my opinion, just natural movements of energy and natural movements of energy that crisscross. Those points, those like node points, hold more energy, natural Earth energies, than what's outside of it. And so there is definitely a factor here that I've seen with remote viewing that does relate to ley lines, specifically ley lines, but also node points within ley lines. In fact, like where they cross over, which is some kind of
Hmm.
important aspect. And we'll get into it, because when you look at land that has certain amount of charge to it, I mean, look at it like using remote viewing data to try to figure out why things happen in certain areas over and over again, strange paranormal phenomena. We always find that it's related to something geological and energy moving through the land, causing some type of electromagnetic disturbance. But it's not just the electromagnetic disturbance itself. It's that there's a part physical phenomena and there's a part multidimensional type phenomena. And those two things usually combine in places. And so that's why people will have very strange experiences. And it always has to do with geology, always has to do with what's going on in the land that's causing this stuff, this energy to move.
Yeah, yeah. I want to point out some unrelated anomalies that seem to revolve around energy as well, just because we're on the topic. John and I went to Serpent Mound, and Serpent Mound seemed to be one of these places that has a lot of this energy. And the reason why they put the serpent on that hill in Ohio is because of the energy that was below the surface. Strange places like Joshua Tree, where you have those very strange looking trees growing in almost spiral directions. And then you have the mystery spots in California and in other areas where balls will literally roll up hills in an inconceivable way. A lot of energy has been put into debunking these, but that's not what we found when we researched the mystery spots. There's a lot of wacky stuff that gets built on the mystery spots to bring in tourists, but then there's actually a physical anomaly going on beneath the surface. And then, and probably even more interesting historically, are the notions we have of a haunted forest that's kind of built into our culture are these bizarre areas in forests which are darker, more silent, and where the trees grow in very strange ways. And you can feel the energy in these forests or in these woods that you might happen upon. It might even be in a certain one area where you constantly get that sort of feeling. John and I did a lot of exploration in Ohio and found a lot of these areas that had much stranger energy, much darker woods that were somewhat inconceivable. So energy in the earth, it's happening all around us. It's happening everywhere. There does seem to be something very special about the UK and the ley lines that are there that are helping to create the recipe of things that you need in order for crop circles to appear. Yeah, what do you think
Well,
about
yeah.
that,
I
John?
mean, the ancient cultures over there, they there are stone circles. I don't remember the specific names of some of these locations, but there are stone circles. And when we looked at that with remote viewing, it was used to capture that energy and create that energy. That's what they were used for. They would do tone, they would make tones in there, which would create more energy. They'd use it for more spiritual purposes. Those ancient cultures have known throughout history, throughout time, that these are very special, sacred areas. And so that's where they built these things. So yeah, there is definitely something going on there that is running through the land. The mere fact that people have been cataloging that for such a long time, people these days, like you can find maps of England, Great Britain, just crisscrossed with ley lines, specific maps made just for ley lines because people have been researching it. Where in the United States, it's very difficult to find. It's incredible. It's somewhere that I have not been, and somewhere that I really really need to go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, agreed. Maybe we can head out there someday
yeah,
and check that stuff out. And I'm imagining that most of the activity is in the fall when after summer or end of summer into fall when most of this stuff is appearing because the crops
yeah.
are
There's a crop circle
at
season.
full growth.
Yeah, yeah. I had a friend who was investigating them, and he went there. He had this like quasi spiritual experience. He started to feel really good, and so he fell asleep and he woke up, and in the field right below him that he was supposed to be watching all night, there was a crop circle, a newly formed crop circle.
That's crazy. What was his reaction to
Oh,
that? Do
he
you
was
know?
like
Like,
he related this quasi spiritual feeling of feeling really good to the things that created the crop circle. Yeah,
really?
that's what he related it to. This is a common theme for people in their experience of the crop circles because people have given reports on them seeing them form. People have given reports. Like based on what I've seen, there's an intelligence behind them, and the intelligence that operates behind it doesn't necessarily want itself to be seen creating it. It sort of goes at a time when no one can potentially see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. You know, one of the interesting things that I happened upon while researching crop circles, John and I have been talking about remote viewing for a number of years now, but when John and I were I was trying to understand the history of remote viewing. John referenced a book that I should go read, and it was called Remote Viewers by a guy named Jim Schnabel. Jim Schnabel wrote that book, and it outlines the history of remote viewing in the I think late '60s and '70s. Jim Schnabel also wrote a book on crop circles that I happened upon while we were researching this. I haven't read the book yet. I'd really want to get my hands on it to see what it is that he said because this guy Jim Schnabel is sort of a mystery to me, like who
Right.
he was, how he knows as much as he does. Is this information coming from him? Is that a pseudonym? There's so many questions I have about that guy, but if you're interested, you can go check that book out. And just to actually get into some of the more notable crop circles that are out there, uh, I think probably the jaw dropper is the most amazing crop circle I think that may have ever been laid. The jaw dropper was found on August 14th, 2001 and it was on Milk Hill in Wiltshire, England. It almost covered the entire width of a massive field. It looks many acres large. And it was made of 409 circles that form a pattern called a double or six-sided triskelion, which is a motif consisting of three interlocking spirals. It's extremely mathematically sophisticated. So one source said that it's 780 feet or 238 meters. Another said it's more than 450 meters. It did cover the field, but the field, I don't think it's not that large of a field. I think it fits within an acre. Yeah, what do you think about this particular one, John?
Yeah,
When you're when
that's crazy looking. It's like I'm guessing that's got to have blown nodes. It looks just way too complicated for somebody to fake in one night. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Um,
how would you do that?
well, they'll use GPS. They'll use GPS and boards and smash it down in certain
Mm.
patterns. So, but I highly doubt that's I highly doubt that that's good.
Would
But
For the ones that are man-made though, wouldn't there be an entrance or an exit
well, in the fields,
evidence?
you can see just in every field there are these sort of track lines that you could walk
Yeah.
down without damaging anything or showing that you walked there. That's not a big deal to do. But I think that the big problem that I have with these photographs being released is that they never say what's going on like on the ground, because see that's how I know whether it's worth it to remote view or not, because I'm not going to remote view. Okay, so remote viewing is just complicated to begin with because you've got a task, you've got viewers, and then you've got to analyze, and it takes a bit of time. I like when I have a little bit of lead on things. And so if I've got a bit of lead to understand that they've got blown nodes, then I'm going to look at it. But on the other side of that, I've looked at enough of these with blown nodes and ones that don't have blown nodes in order to understand what's going on, right? Ultimately understand what's going on.
Right.
And these are consistent things. These
Mm.
happen on a regular basis for specific reasons. And they are
Mm.
not humans. They are not humans doing
Mm.
this. So,
So, okay. So, what you're basically saying is that there are a number of these that are done by humans, and then there are a number of them that are unexplainable to the naked eye.
yeah, I mean, see that. Okay, so from my perspective, it's like that big one that you just showed. That looks incredibly complicated, and it's likely that that isn't some kind of hoax, and that it does have blown nodes. But I'd rather see that first than just like remote view it personally. Like I'd rather see scientific data that leads me into going, okay, let's see what did this. That is going to tell you right off the bat. Like you don't need remote viewing data to know whether it's a true anomaly or not. You need remote viewing data to understand why the anomaly happens, but you don't need remote viewing data to tell you if it's a true anomaly. You don't. All
Right.
you got to do is
Right.
look at the data on the ground. That's it. Nothing else.
Okay. And because we showed that more complicated one, I just want to show the other side of this, which is one that screams BS to me. And that is the alien face that
Right.
was found August 15th, 2002. This was Crabwood Farmhouse in Sparsholt in North Winchester, Hampshire, England. Okay.
Well, it's breaking from a long tradition of circles and fractals, and all of a sudden now it's an alien with ASCII writing. It's like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
There's an encoded binary message that reportedly said, beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. Believe there is good out there. We oppose deception. Conduit closing.
Is just somebody messing around, because I'll tell you, aliens don't have anything to do with this.
Interesting. All right, let's go into what the heck is going on. What is, John, your remote viewing data on crop circles, the ones where they have, as you said, bulbs blown, and then what's the story with the hoaxers? I'm curious.
Okay, so the data around how it's created and what's creating it takes us down like a it takes us into a multi-dimensional realm. It's not like a planetary. It isn't like a flying saucer nest, you know. It isn't anything like that. Flying saucer nests are just these swirls. It's a little bit difficult to explain, and it goes down a weird rabbit hole. But these are like multi-dimensional constructs. If you could see into multiple dimensions at once, from earth dimensions and those that are around it, and you saw a crop circle, it wouldn't be this like 2D representation of something like written on a paper. You would see it in as it's stretching through multiple dimensions, because this thing is created with intentful energy intentful energy, and the crop circle itself is like a leftover energetic imprint of what happened, right? So I know it sounds weird, it sounds ridiculous, but the things that create these are you would see them as orbs, right? You would see them as floating balls of light, like moving around. So orbs in and of itself, like orbs that are on Earth, are a natural phenomena that consciousness can embed itself into or be. I've seen, like, with night vision and in IR, like rivers of like this energy flowing, orbs, just orb after orb, just rivers and rivers of it. Not all of those things that people see orbs are a consciousness. So it's like a plasma type energy, right? And it's a plasma type energy that something dimensionally can use and then affect into our dimension. It's got this big crossover thing. What we have are these beings that are in another dimension who cross over, who are creating these things in that specific area on ley line node points and ley lines in order to do various things. But there's always these sort of like, there's a list of things they do, but there's like these guardrails around it. That one was for opening up the energetic flow between these two node points to let something come in or come through. This other one was to close it down because something they didn't want to get through was trying to get through. I know people have seen UFOs in weird craft around these as well. Sometimes they are opening up in order to let something like that through. So when you get into like these sort of natural type currents that flow around the earth, there are people in military and government black project type groups that know about these locations and places, and they quite often will set up military installations near those or on those in order to try to understand how to utilize it, because they are giving off like readable energy, right? And so these beings that you have here are the natural part of all this, except they're conscious, and their whole thing is to control those node points. And so the graphical structure of these things has to do with what it's for, with what that particular energetic imprint that they were doing was for at that period in time. And these beings are related to the Fae realm. They're part of like the whole mythology of Great Britain that goes into fairies and that realm, because that's like, from remote viewing data, I consider that a realm. Like, it's not just that type of thing that exists within it, but it's others as well. And this is a very important area for them. And we've seen this before, haven't we? We saw it with
Yeah.
with the New Jersey forest, right? The pine barrens,
Yes.
right?
The
Remote
Pine
viewing
Barrens.
data reflected something similar in that there's something from a different realm trying to protect. Now, this is like it varies. It varies. It's not only about that. It's about moving energy in different directions that creates this imprint that we end up seeing on the ground. And within a couple of hours, that imprint the energy goes away because it's already done what it's supposed to do.
Interesting points as you were talking about that. Why the mathematics? Is it a natural part of the energy, or are those more like sigils that they're using?
Some are signals or like a mix. Like if you okay, so if you see the Celt, sometimes you'll see Celt designs in this, and if they've got blown nodes, like the Celt people were related, not necessarily related, but knew deeper what they were, and so these symbols were traded in a sense in the past, and so that's why sometimes you see that type of iconography imprinted in the crops. And then when you have the fractals, the math part, it's likely combined with, it likely has meaning upon meaning with it, not only symbolically, but structurally in what the
Mm.
energy was for and why it imprinted itself that way. Because it was meant to do something at that moment in time on an energetic field construct.
And so this, so now when we get into even the phrasing I'm using, sigils, I mean, there's a long history across the earth in different cultures of necromancy, of witchcraft, of the occult, using symbols to generate energy. And those are the references that we're aware of because they're largely considered evil. I think it's a good to clear up that entire thing because the this idea of paganism and which is a very general term, by the way, to describe anything that's not Christianity. There's a lot of dissenting feelings on these things that they're all evil. But what if instead these are ancient cultures that we don't understand that have lost the root here, and it was easier at that time for it all to get jammed into this term paganism and for us to just kind of uh, have a sweeping understanding that it's all, uncivilized witchcraft where there was actually something deeper that was going on.
There's nothing that came across in remote viewing data over all the years that I've been looking at this stuff that would lend it towards anything to have to do with their interpretation of this stuff. This is some other realm, some other beings thing that they're working with and doing, and it's moving through multiple dimensions and imprinting on ours, not meant to cause. In fact, there's a good feeling behind these things when you remote view them. There's nothing negative, there's nothing dark. And it's like it's the weird thing too. It's like, truth is stranger than fiction here, right? Look, what would people accept as far as an explanation on something like this goes? What would be the easiest thing for people to accept? When I hear the words coming out of my mouth on what the remote viewing data is, I cringe. You know what I'm saying? I cringe because it just sounds batty,
Right.
right? Because it sounds insane. But that's what the remote viewing data is. But on the other side, and I know that a lot of people would listen to it and just go, God, that's just weird. Man,
Yeah.
I don't understand. That's just weird. But then it's like, well, what would you expect for an explanation?
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, and especially when it's the cringe comes from when you start bringing up the Fey,
Exactly. But that's like what the
the
data
Fey
is.
realm.
I don't know what to say.
It seems outlandish and almost ridiculous to even bring up, but then there are things like, yeah, there are things like this we just don't understand. And where I think it gets even weirder is most of modern society views these things as a result of alien technology. And then you couple the fact that there is this Fey energy interacting with what could be actual alien technology that's coming out of the universe, where aliens are showing up here to study potentially the energy signatures and or coming through portals that are being created we don't understand. And
Right.
then where does it just gets weirder and
It does.
weirder,
It just gets
really,
weirder
because
and
now
weirder.
you've got this ancient concept which seems very separate from modern research being done on aliens and alien technology. And then no, you've got these things on Earth interacting all at the same time. They all exist, and we're just to believe that.
Right. Right.
It's
People are very pragmatic in the way they, interpret, go about things. And while they see these other weird things happening, they will go into sort of a pragmatic idea about why those things are happening, but they still don't know, and they still maybe it's some kind of like weird physics thing that we don't quite understand, but it's a natural thing. Okay, so then we remote view it, and it turns out that it's not, which it quite often isn't. And we do get a lot of this realm that's like close to and crossed over ours, that's responsible for a lot of the strange phenomena that people do see, which turns it not into a nuts and bolts type alien thing, but into an interdimensional being wisp, will o' the wisp kind of thing, right? Now, people are starting to treat aliens with more of a pragmatic attitude. It's becoming part of their worldview. They'd be willing to accept that. And those are just UFO nests. They've been camping out there. They've got baby UFOs, and they're making UFO nests, and it's like, oh, okay, all right, that's a little easier to swallow than freaking fairies.
Right. Or that fairy energy would be interacting with alien UFOs.
Right.
Because as you said, it's like humans are so pragmatic. We just want our theory to bucket this into one strange phenomena,
Right.
and then it just gets full on crazy when we start really looking at this, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, the fairies created an energy portal, and the aliens are interacting with it and came through a couple times.
It's so funny.
But hey, this is the world we live in, right? Why does there have to be one type of answer for all of these things? I don't think that's definitely a human machination of us trying to understand the natural world,
Right.
that doesn't make sense to begin with. Paranormal anomalies stacked on top of one another are very hard for us to conceive, Okay, so another question that I just want to get into, because it's just, I can almost feel the questions that people would have at home listening to this right now. These beings that are an intelligent, natural result potentially of the consciousness that exists and or the fey energy,
It's
whatever
like a
you want to call
realm
it.
right off of ours. Right off of ours.
Right.
Yeah.
Like instead of the upside down, it's like the downside up or
Yeah,
something.
it's a
It's just
livable place, and I think that a lot of
right.
what people talk about, weird cryptids and strange things like that appear and disappear, are moving in and out of that.
Correct. These beings and this intelligence that we've been discussing, or these fairies, whatever you want to call it, what do they feel like their modus operandi is? Like what are their goals? Why do they do what they do? I mean, this is a
Like, it was
fairly
expressed that they were
complicated.
like an army. And one of the big things they do is to protect. But on the other side of it, they, like, when you view them, they're really freaking happy. They're really, really happy and excited and excitable. And when they come from their dimension into ours, it's like if you were trying to shove your head into a mayonnaise bottle
Yeah.
and then pop,
Okay.
then you're in. And so it takes a lot of effort for them to like make the shift, the transition from one dimension to another, because they're much bigger than I don't even know how to explain it. But when you're remote viewing, you can understand what it feels like for them to have to do something like that. And you can only use the metaphors that we've got because we don't do that stuff. But that's what it feels like. But it's a fun thing for them to do, because what they do is to protect. And the way they protect is by moving in that way to get into another location, so they can make the imprint to have it stretch throughout dimensions in order to protect or to move things or to move blocked energy. And so they're like these spiritual beings. Like they're not orbs where they come from. That's just the form they take when they come into physical reality. There's something different. They look different. They're bigger, much, much bigger, and they can just be a form, whatever form they want, really, when you get right down to it.
I have a theory about this that I don't know if it may help people understand what's going on or not. So microscopic energy is much stronger than the energy that we have on this plane. And when I say plane, I mean plane of existence, right? Yeah, and then there's all these studies around the quantum world. We now have quantum computing, which is computing not only in a smaller, more compact place, but then also in other dimensions. I'm wondering if the reason why they appear much bigger here is because the size in which they are and that more microscopic, we think microscopic, but actually microscopic could just be the arrangement of their atoms or molecules, where they're actually, even though we think of that as smaller, it's much larger because it's more fine. And so when it comes over here and they as you said, jam their head into that mayonnaise jar, it's just much larger than we would think of here with that current understanding of
Yeah,
science.
quantum.
Does
Yeah,
that
oh
make
yeah,
sense?
absolutely. The largest is the smallest too. That's people place too much importance on just the physical. That's the pragmatic side, just the physical characteristic of something, as if it matters. But when you get into dimensional and more quantum realm, that doesn't mean a thing. It means nothing. Yeah,
Right. It's like, right. So it's like, and how I came to this is a combination of things, but then also you have to ask yourself questions when you start seeing the type of energy that smaller molecules give off in this
yeah.
dimension. If the energy is that great from some of these like atom bombs and things like that, there's something else going on in these quantum realms that we don't fully understand. Why would splitting an atom that's that small
Cause that much energy.
cause that much destruction in a dimension that would seemingly be much more macroscopic than
Right.
where that energy is taking is kind of exploding or taking off
Yeah.
from. It doesn't make sense in the human mind, but then it makes complete sense in the non-physical
Right.
world.
Yeah. And this goes into spiritual topics too, where you're both form and formless, and formless are the same thing. But to the black and white practical thinking brain that has to survive, that doesn't make any sense because it's just a contradiction. But you get into spiritual matters and also quantum world, and it's all contradictions to the human mind.
All
Yeah.
contradictions. It's everything's turned upside down here. Yeah, another example of that is that only when certain monks and things, as they were cultivating and their celestial eyes were opening, even Buddha, right? He had that famous line that the many worlds theory, in a grain of sand in the river Ganges, there's 3,000 worlds. And then if you go into that world and you look at a grain of sand in that world, there's another 3,000 worlds. And it goes on like that endlessly, endlessly, endlessly. We're talking about worlds here. I wonder if as we become more capable, as you cultivate higher, or as your cultivation energy gets greater, if you're going into these more microscopic places that are much larger than the physical world, right? Your body is able to move in and out of those dimensions, or you're able to observe them in a much easier way, which would be the only thing I can imagine that would account for that type of a vision by some of these monks that
Right.
that we've seen throughout
Yeah.
history.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
I really want to know what you guys think about all of this crazy madness we've been talking about on this podcast. Are there questions that you have about this whole thing that we haven't covered? Please comment. Let us know. The comments are the most interesting part for us in this episode. We love to know what you guys think and different stories that you guys have. Another thing that I want to say is I think it's about time we did an episode just on fairies, because I have a good friend who sent me a photo of something that they can't explain. Her sister, who sent me this photo, her sister and her husband are both, one is an accountant, one is a lawyer, and they didn't know what they were looking at. And so they ended up sending it to a friend of theirs who was a biologist who studies these types of things. And they had no explanation for the photo that I was sent. This thing doesn't look like anything that exists on Earth. And there was a dead one that they found in their backyard.
What?
So maybe, yeah, I think we should go over it in that episode.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
But that's not the only photo. There are other photos of these things that look similar that people have alleged were fairies, and there's no explanation for these things. We can lay out all of the data in that episode and try to understand what the heck these are, and then get John's remote viewing data. So if you want to see that episode also. And in the meantime, until we get to that episode, I highly recommend you guys watching our episode that we did on trolls, elves, fairies, and gnome creatures. We've also got an episode on little being encounters that I highly recommend you checking out. All of these are related and unrelated depending on how you look at the data. So what do you guys think about crop circles too? Definitely a bunch of them are hoaxes, but John's remote viewing data about the general crop circle anomaly is really fascinating, and love to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys for being with us. John, thanks so much for everything. And for those of you at home, I hope you thought this episode was out of this world.